Hey everyone, welcome to a fresh episode of Spin Cycle, the show for short reviews of albums new and old. And today, I'm in the mood for a fight, so we're doing a versus episode. And today it's going to be an interesting versus because it's going to be looking at Derrick Green of Sepultura's first album versus his most recent album. So we're talking about Against versus Machine Messiah. Little background though, Sepultura, if you don't know, has had a tumultuous history as a band, and people have some very strong opinions in that regard. Derrick Green joined the band in 1998 following Max Cavalera's departure in 1996. And Cavalera left the band due to disputes with both Andreas Kisser and his brother Igor. Now, Max and Igor had created Sepultura in 1984 before adding Paolo Jr. in 1985 and Kisser in 1987. So obviously when people thought of Sepultura, they thought of the Cavaleras. But as of today, Derrick Green has been in the band for longer than Max Cavalera was ever in the band. So I do think it's fair to say that he is a part of Sepultura as much as anybody else in the band, even though most of their popular hits occurred before he joined. Albums like Roots, Chaos AD, Beneath the Remains. And after Igor's departure in 2006, the band belonged to Kisser, Paolo Jr., and Derrick Green. So at this point, it is definitely their band. So let's look at the albums. Against was the seventh studio album from Sepultura and the first with Derrick Green. It was released in 1998. The Derrick Green era officially begins with a bang with the titular opening track. That really gets the album going. And there's some groovy riffs with the classic Sepultura tribal percussion throughout the album, which definitely builds on the success of an album like Roots. It has more groove metal elements than thrash, but there's still plenty of thrash peppered in throughout the album. It's also indicative of the music of the time. It's reminiscent of fellow Roadrunner band Slipknot. It has a very similar sound to Slipknot's first release. They also hadn't lost their staunchly political edge in their lyrics. You listen to a song like Boycott, which is a superb song for this type of attitude. And you can definitely feel Paolo Jr.'s bass throughout. This is a bass-heavy album. And Kisser has a few solid guitar solos, but his best contribution to the music here is to the compositions. Green sometimes feels like he's trying too much to replicate Max's vocal style instead of inserting his own voice and really taking control of his new role as the lead man of Sepultura. But that's understandable since, at the time, people knew Sepultura as Max Cavalera's band, and no one could have predicted the future of the band, so they probably wanted to keep it as contained and simple as they could. Now, Igor shines most brightly with his thrash drumming on songs like Reza and Hatred Aside, but his tribal percussion is always a fun highlight of Sepultura's sound. Some of my favorite tracks are their collaborations with people like Kodo and Jason Newsted, who was with Metallica at the time. So what about Machine Messiah? It's the 14th studio album from Sepultura and the 8th with Derrick Green. It starts off with a sludgy, doomy titular track before opening up a really awesome Andreas Kisser guitar solo. After that, the raw, brutal Sepultura shows up with songs like I Am the Enemy and Phantom Self. Both of those are absolute crushers. I also really love the instrumental song Iceberg Dances, which is just an all-around incredible composition from Kisser and their drummer, Eloy Casagrande. It definitely speaks to their abilities, both Kisser as a guitarist and Casagrande as a drummer and songwriter. And more so than Against, it seems to have a focused sound. I would almost call this album groove thrash. It's got a lot of groove elements, but also a lot more thrash than you heard on Against. There's also more to the songs, especially the orchestral elements in songs like Sworn Oath. Some of the songs are really built up. I also like the concept behind the album, the idea of the Machine Messiah. It's one of those albums that reminds me why I love the cerebral exploration in metal, the idea of these really deep social themes. Green's vocals are still very harsh, but the music here better fits his style. And Kisser makes his presence known on every track with some absolute amazing guitar solos. Likewise, Casagrande has really come into his role as the drummer of the band because he is a fantastic drummer. I can't say much about Paolo Jr. because it seems like the guitar work and the drumming really takes more precedence over the bass in this album. And there are a number of superb tracks, including tracks like Resistant Parasites, I Am the Enemy, and Silent Violence, to name a few. So which one wins? I really wish this were closer, but it doesn't take long to see that Machine Messiah is the superior album. Time was kind to this band as they evolved and cemented their post-Cavalera style. Machine Messiah feels a lot more like a complete album. Against is less of a risk, but it's also less of a payoff. It's almost not fair to compare the two albums, but it does show Green's progress with the band, as well as the band's adaptation following two major shakeups, both of the Cavaleras leaving. Now, I can't ignore the difference in times because, again, the 90s were more fractured than what we have now in terms of metal. But more than anything, Machine Messiah is an album from a band who has nailed down their identity. Against was a fine start for Green, don't get me wrong, it's a good album, but he's really taken control of this band, and it shows on an album like Machine Messiah. Both albums have clear strengths, but it's the cohesiveness of Machine Messiah that puts it above Against. Simply put, it's a more satisfying listening experience. So by total, complete knockout, I give the win to Machine Messiah. And I was excited to do this because tonight, when I'm recording this, I am seeing Sepultura with Testament. So my top 5 for the week, I'm doing a random shuffle again. Graze by Live off of Secret Samadhi, that's one of my favorite live albums, and just an awesome song from the album. No Saving Me by Walls of Jericho off of With Devils Amongst Us All, showing they're not just a hardcore band, she actually does have an amazing singing voice. Crystallize by Lindsey Sterling off of her self-titled album. I just love Lindsey Sterling's music. Overcome by Unearth off of Darkness in the Light. Not one of the Unearth albums that I've listened to a lot, but still very much a good song. And then It's No Good by The Dreaming off of Puppet. It's a Depeche Mode cover, but The Dreaming definitely does a good job with it. Let me know your thoughts on Sepultura's new album. Which one you think is better, older or newer Derrick Green era Sepultura? And that does it for this episode of Spin Cycle. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Nice work. Good job. If you like what you saw, you can just go ahead and click that subscribe button for all videos past and future. You can also head over to my website and see all the other stuff that I do, including the books I've written. So go ahead, click stuff.